govern. And for those of you who don't know, Govan, or as I like to call it, the People's Republic of Govan, is an area on the south side of Glasgow, not very far from here, kind of directly that way, maybe just a mile or so away from here. It doesn't have much like this. It doesn't have ivory towers in Govan, or not that I know of, but it does have a lot of history. In Govan, that's where you can find the remnants of Glasgow's shipbuilding legacy. So for those of you that don't know anything about that, can I encourage you to go and have a look and find out about what has made this city great? I recommend a trip to Fairfield Heritage Centre, which is a museum which will tell you all about the history of shipbuilding here, and that's important to Glasgow and to Govan, and to how once we ruled the waves. It's also where you can find Ibrox. One or two of you might have heard of Ibrox, the home of the once mighty Glasgow Rangers, possibly to be mighty once again, but the world famous Glasgow Rangers. It's where you can find the Govan hogbacks, the Govan stones. These are 31 medieval stones carved as a commemoration of when the mighty rulers of Strathclyde once lived. But these days the landscape and the industry in Govan is completely different. These days it's media-tastic. It's the home to BBC Scotland's headquarters, Pacific Quay, which those of us who have worked there call the Great Glass Shoebox on the Clyde. There's sunny Govan Community Radio Station, always looking for volunteers. Why don't you go and give it a shot on the airwaves? There's a digital media centre there, and there's a hub called Glasgow Film City, which is an industry base for the film and television sector in Glasgow. And it's in the old Govan Town Hall, an absolutely stunning building, which I recommend you go and have a look at as well on the trip that you're all going to go on Govan one day, aren't you? But for me, the trip to Govan symbolises what crossing the Rubicon is really all about. And that's not just because of river analogies. I don't know about the Rubicon, but if you are going to go to Govan, I recommend you go over by ferry. There is a ferry that goes from the Museum of Transport. I highly recommend it. It's a great cafe on the other side. But no, seriously, for me, the People's Republic of Govan, remember I call it, is a symbol of why we need to challenge ourselves to grow and learn, why we need to shake off our security blankets and burst our protective bubbles and get rid of our complacency. But to explain what I mean, I hope you'll bear with me as I go backwards in time. You willing to come back with me? Thank you. See, when I was a wee girl in Glasgow, I was a very shy little girl. That little girl would never have believed I would have been doing this now. I was very shy and very insecure. I was the eldest of 3 girls being brought up in a single-parent family in Glasgow in the 70s, and that was not a common thing in those days. That made me feel a bit different, it made me feel a bit of an outsider, it made me feel a bit weird, and it made me feel even more insecure and unsure of myself. I was actually scared of just about everything. I went bright red when anybody spoke to me. I couldn't speak to more than one person at a time. I was even scared to go to the shops to buy a pan loaf or a pint of milk for my mum. I was worried I'd get the change wrong or ordered the wrong thing. But even back then, I was being encouraged to boldly to go to places where others feared to tread, to go to the point of no return, to cross my own Rubicons. Let me explain. That's because as a child with my sisters, we were encouraged by my father on the rare occasions that we saw him. We were taken with him to go to galaxies far, far away. We were taken right out of our childhood comfort zones. We were taken on adventures to see the tenements of Mairi Hill being demolished. You might not know this now, but there were streets and streets and streets of tenements in Mairi Hill, and we were allowed to throw stones at the windows because they were derelict already, so that's a rare luxury. I don't think many kids are encouraged to do that these days. We went to the top of the Red Road flats, already demolished, recently demolished as some of you will know, where we were treated to the most amazing views of Glasgow and central Scotland and the mountains in the distance. We actually climbed some of those mountains with Dad. We went wild camping in the days before camping was called wild camping. And we did what we've sort of affectionately come to know as territorial style army walks. We were taken to see Celtic in Scotland playing football, and this was in the days before girls went to football. I've got strong memories of lines of men peeing up against walls and guys selling Wrigley spearmint gum chewing gum. We were once even taken on a city-wide treasure hunt. We were dumped miles and miles away from home with nothing but a map and bus fares and me in charge. I think I was about 7 at the time with 2 small sisters. I tell you, that was scary. And what was the treasure? It was nothing but an ice cream and a glass of American cream soda in the Grosvenor Cafe in my room when we got back. We were swizzed. But I want to tell you about one day that particularly stays in my mind, and that was a day in Govan. Because we were once taken there to see the Govan Queen being crowned, which you can still see. The Queen is crowned, a young girl is chosen and crowned as Queen, and she's paraded through the streets of Govan. And she is an ambassador for the area, if you like. But when we went, it was in the mid-70s, it was in the middle of a heat wave, and there was thousands and thousands and thousands of people on the streets of that part of the city. Now, bearing in mind this is Glasgow, it was the summer holidays, and those people were in very high spirits, and they were pretty steaming, most of them. So it was frightening and it was fantastic. And those people were a wee bit different than the people we knew. They were different from our aunts and uncles, from our mum and dad, from our friends, from our cousins. They were all done up to the nines, and they were spending money like water, but they didn't seem like rich people to me. They did a lot of swearing, that was quite exciting, and a lot of laughing, and that was exciting too. They were actually letting it all hang out in a way that we'd never seen before, and that to me was the essential Glasgow. So that sounds great, doesn't it? But some of these adventures were actually terribly scary, and made this insecure wee girl even more insecure. I was often quite frightened. Places like Govan and Lamb Hill and the Garngad were places that were populated. They were like other planets, they were populated by aliens to me. But do you know what? Gradually, I started to get a bit braver. I started to realise that these people were not aliens, they were just people. They were pretty skint, those aliens. A lot of them didn't have a lot of money. Quite a few of them liked a bevy, a wee bit of a bevy. Quite a few of them liked more than a wee bit of a bevy. Some of them were rough as old boots, but you know what? I liked them. Those people were great. They were just people, they weren't aliens after all. And during that process, I can honestly say, boy, did we girls learn. Thanks to my dad's alternative parenting, which I think would probably get him in a lot of trouble with social services these days, we met people of all shapes and sizes, people from all backgrounds, people from countries all over the world in the days when Glasgow was not the multicultural place it is now. We met people from social backgrounds completely different than our own, and we learned a lot about how other people looked and how they lived. We very, very quickly learned that not everybody was as privileged or as lucky as we were. So you can imagine those experiences have left a really lasting mark and very little room for complacency in my life and the lives of my sisters. I'm sure I can speak for them. And that kind of learning has allowed me to develop as a human being into somebody who will go boldly where others won't go, to do things like public speaking in front of hundreds of people, even though it is pretty scary. The experiences haven't necessarily stopped me being a frightened person, I still am in many ways, but they have helped me to go right up to the edge and cross the Rubicon and not look back. So, shall we go back to Govan? When fate took me back there many, many years later to work as a radio producer at BBC Scotland in the glittering edifice of the PQ building, there was a standing joke amongst my colleagues about what they laughingly called Mairi's crossing the Rubicon walks. And that's because I was one of very few people that would actually leave the building to go for a lunchtime stroll into the wilds of Govan. I like to take a walk through the streets to have a look at the tenements and at the shops and at the inner city landscape. You know, a lot of Govan, it's not particularly pretty, A lot of it's very run down these days and shabby. It's a shadow of its former majestic self. And it's definitely not got its problems to seek. It's one of the poorest parts of Glasgow. People there, a very high percentage of people there, are living on very little. But you might not know that, and you might not care about that, unless you go for a walk and open your eyes and your minds. So I took those walks partly for fresh air and exercise, because it's good for you, but also to keep perspective and focus and my own complacency at bay. It's good to take stock of how lucky you are, and that's something that I still do as much as I can. So I walked through Govan in those lunchtime strolls or crossing the Rubicon walks to challenge my own fears and my own perceptions. I walked to go and get good crack with the people that I met, to talk to the shopkeepers, just folk in the street, because you may have discovered that people in Glasgow like a chat, and if you haven't discovered that, start talking to them, please. And it is true, all of life can be found on Paisley Road West, and not just Paisley Road West, but Alexandra Parade, and Saracen Street in Possil, and Hecla Square in Dunchapel. But here's the rub. I partly went on those lunchtime walks to think about what I could do that might make a difference to the lives of people living in places like Govan. I wanted to try and work out if there was anything that I could do to try and help end the endless cycles of poverty in Glasgow and places like Govan, to try and put a stop to the grim side of life. So although the frightened wee girl is still here, she's right here in this body standing before you, those walks did lead me to another point of no return, to a new career, to a career running a small business, working in the third sector and with people who are on a lot less than me. A career that might just make small differences now and again. You see, the way I see it, we've all got a duty to try and make small differences for those less lucky than us. And between us, we can all take small steps to making big differences. But to do that, we've got to open our eyes. We've got to explore the unknown, go to places that make us uncomfortable. We've got to be open to other kinds of lives and burst our wee bubbles. And see, when that wee bubble comes back around us, as it always does, go for a walk and burst it again. So I hope you'll all join me one day for a jaunt to Govan. Believe me, you'll be a better person for it if you do. Because once you've crossed that Rubicon, or is it the Clyde maybe, there's no going back.